spitting syllables, soliloquies so simple as these. It's Rockin' and Rappin', a podcast with a purpose to save humanity and enlighten the dark. I'm your host, King Cooper. You know who thinks about money? Poor people. Money's made up. Worrying will waste your time, a real asset. We all know the money printer goes brrr, but time is only slipping away. What are we supposed to do for money? You gotta eat? That's the wrong attitude. You don't eat money, it's a mediator to food. Cut out the middleman. People don't know how difficult it is to grow enough food to fill a single plate. The truth is, they've already made the decision that sitting in an office in exchange for fiat is preferable to sweating under the sun. Now let's jump into some Shakespeare. I was doing sonnets, and I'm going to do sonnet 49 because before I had done sonnets 43 through 50, but had skipped 49 in lieu of sonnet 69. Here is sonnet 49. Against that time, if ever that time come, when I shall see thee frown on my defects, when as thy love hath cast his utmost sum, called to the audit by advised respects, against that time when thou shalt strangely pass, and scarcely greet me with that sun, thine eye, when love, converted from the thing it was, shall reasons find to settled gravity, against that time do I ensconce me here, within the knowledge of mine own desert, and this my hand against myself uprear, to guard the lawful reasons on thy part, to leave poor me thou hast the strength of laws, since why to love I can allege no cause. So the sonnet is about him preparing to be rejected by a lover, but hopes against that time. When rejected, he says, I shall see thee frown on my defects, and scarcely meet with that sun, thine eye. So I like that part of that sun, the thing that gives energy, thine eye. You know, the eye is the window to the soul. And against that time is a repetitive line that we heard again and again. One word that you might not be familiar with is ensconce. And that basically means to settle down, so that he would settle with that decision she made. And then I just want to cover at the end, to leave poor me thou hast the strength of laws, since why to love I can allege no cause, so that she's justified in what she's doing. And so the strength of laws, and the line before had said that he had no lawful reason she should stay. Now, you might wonder, why read from the book that it's bad for the camera to be looking down? I want the viewer to know these words come straight from the text. There's no mediator to this media. I'll tell you a story. One time in the Army, we were returning weapons back to the arms room, and the armor asked for the weapon's serial number, and one guy rattled off his serial number from memory because in basic training, we were made to memorize the weapon serial number as an exercise in discipline. The armorer congratulated him for knowing it by heart, but he needs to have eyes on the weapon to prove the physical thing being stored is correct. Looking at the book is citing my source. This book says that. Now, I'll be moving on to the rapping portion. Last week I did a rap from 50 Cent's Patiently Waiting. I'll be doing another portion from that song because this part, I had learned this rap during my queen's first pregnancy. We knew the baby would be in the NICU, and there's not much as painful as your baby being born and then a group of nurses running out of the room with it. Thankfully, the doctor delivering had the wherewithal to say, "Did you let the mother hold the baby?" I'm always saying there's more to existence than we're consciously aware of. I'm a big believer in skin-to-skin contact for a baby, and at the time of birth, I'm sure there are smells and hormones in the air, even the sweat on mama that triggers the baby. Did you know that when a woman is pregnant, it will cause estrogen levels to increase in the man she's living with to make him more docile and caring? This rap was basically a prayer for myself, or a mantra, a word repeated to aid concentration. The etymology of mantra being a Sanskrit word for think. There was a lot of concentration on going back and forth from mom and baby. I was also caring for my mother-in-law who was living with us after a near-death hospitalization. And at the end of everything, when baby and mom had returned home, my dog stopped eating for a couple days, and I was afraid we'd lose him. It reminded me of in the Epic of Gilgamesh, when they had just defeated Humbaba, whose breath is death. And while celebrating, Gilgamesh realized his best friend Enkidu had been mortally wounded. Some other time we'll go over Gilgamesh to explain why a dog is man's Enkidu. Here's the rap. You've been patiently waiting to make it through all the hating, debating whether or not you could even weather the storm. As you lay on the table, they operating to save you. It's like an angel came to you, sent from the heavens above. So I said that a lot when, I don't know, walking back and forth between hospital rooms, just walking around at night, just lost. But some things to cover in that rap would be that kind of metronome effect of the rhymes: waiting, debating, hating. You've been patiently waiting to make it through all the hating, debating. The next part I'd cover is you could even, whether or not you could even weather the storm, so that kind of makes its own unique sound. You could even. AI for speech recognition is bad because humans often don't have gaps in the words when they speak. We can understand it, but a computer would have to be programmed for that specific combination to hear it. Please take a moment to subscribe or follow the channel. Now for the wreck of the week. What has been wrecking my week? Oh, I've been sick for over a week probably. And what I want to talk about because of that was Sudafed. And I know Alex had fallen prey to this scam earlier in the week, but Sudafed is different than Sudafedrin. So the actual pharmaceutical that you want when you're sick is Sudafedrin. And when you are sick, Sudafed is the only thing that I have found to really make a difference. I believe it clears your sinuses or opens your sinuses. Nasal decongestant, some may call it. Sudafed is also sold on the shelves, but Sudafedrin, you need to get it from a pharmacist, and you have to show your government ID before you can get it, because some people have used it for nefarious purposes in the past. So it ruined the fun for the rest of us. But that's why this is a PSA that you must see a pharmacist and provide ID in order to get the actual Sudafedrin. If you're just buying a box that says Sudafed, it's likely the same thing as Mucinex. After all that wrecking, we need to calm down with some of Marcus Aurelius's meditations. We're up to meditation number 7. From Rusticus: to grasp the idea of wanting correction and treatment for my character, not to be diverted into a taste for rhetoric, so not writing up my own speculations, delivering my own little moral sermons, and presenting a glorified picture of the ascetic or the philanthropic, to keep clear of speechifying, versifying, and pretentious language, not to walk around at home in ceremonial dress, or do anything else like that, to write letters in an unaffected style, like his own letter written to my mother from Sinusa, to be readily recalled to consolation with those who have taken or given offense, just as soon as they themselves are willing to turn back, to read carefully, not satisfied with my own superficial thoughts, or quick to accept the facile views of others, to have encountered the discourses of Epictetus, to which he introduced me with his own copy. Some words that people may not be familiar with: consolation. So it would be to end a disagreement. And some may say that I need to end disagreements, and I'm all for that. But as Marcus Aurelius says, just as soon as they themselves are willing to turn back. The next word people might not know is facile. I'm familiar with it being French for easy, and it means easy. So going over what we read. In the beginning, it says to grasp the idea of wanting correction. And this is why we tune in to wrecking and rapping, why I make it, because I want correction. And that I want to be better. Hopefully you do as well. We all can be better. Next, not to be delivered into the taste of rhetoric. And it's something I talked about a lot last week with philosophy. And so rhetoric being maybe speaking, but we could call it philosophy, we could call it discourse, and just talking and talking and writing, but never actually saying anything. So don't fall into that trap, which is why I take notes and think, what do I actually want to say? What is important to be put down to tape, air quotes, because that's a joke. When things were recorded in the past, it was actually put on physical tape. Now it's all digital. Next, not to be delivering my own little sermons. Now, we're sort of doing that now, but, I'm not putting myself above anyone else, even though I am wearing a crown and I am King Cooper, after all. But you get my point. The next part was to not give a glorified picture of the ascetic or the philanthropic. And I think that happens a lot, where people get caught up believing somebody is good because they've donated so much money or they've done these sort of deeds, or even so that'd be the philanthropic. But ascetic would be not having stuff, living on the streets, being a minimalist. But to not glorify these things, that they don't actually say anything about the person themselves. And I think that's what a lot of people think, that, oh, they do good deeds, they're a good person. Oftentimes what we can see, at least the grandiose deeds, they end up being covering for not so good deeds. Not satisfied with my own superficial thoughts. And that's another reason that I take notes on what I'm studying each week, and I read and reread and reread until I just get more thoughts. So never be satisfied with the first thing that comes to your mind, or the easy thing to get. Always dig deeper. Now let's dig deeper into some history. This week in history, the Boston Tea Party took place December 16th, 1773. Britain had racked up some debt, since the British are always at war with the French. You might remember Joan of Arc being the end point of the 100-year war between France and Britain. Imagine a war for over 100 years. We live in this time of peace, which I'll get to the book someday, The Invention of Peace. And it's changed our minds that we live in this world of peace, but they lived in a world of war. The British thought they could recoup some of their losses by raising taxes on tea in the Americas. The colonists disagreed with a decision they had no say in: no taxation without representation. And that was apparently against one of their British rights at the time. With the colonies being so large and Britain so far away, it was easy to just dodge the tax collectors, and this led to a growing military force in the colonies that boiled over with the Boston Massacre, when a group of 9 redcoats opened fire on several hundred civilians. On December 16th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty threw an entire shipment of tea into the Boston harbor. That was British colonists in America destroying a Dutch shipment of Chinese tea. As a result, Britain closed the port of Boston until they repaid the damages, which they never did, setting off a chain of reaction leading to the American Revolution. Once, while I was a child visiting Boston, we were asking for directions to this historic site, and a man shouted, "You better hurry up, they're almost out of tea." And we're still laughing today. Now we'll move on to some Bible reading. I've got prepared 1 Corinthians chapter 9. So 1 Corinthians means the first letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. And that would be the people of Corinth. Here we go. Chapter 9. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? If I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you. For the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. Mine answer to them that do examine me is this: have we not power to eat and to drink? Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? Cephas means Peter. Or I only and Barnabas, have not we power to forbear working? Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and not eateth of their milk of the flock? Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care of oxen? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. This is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a greater thing that we shall reap the carnal things? If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple? And they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be so done unto me. For it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. What is my reward then? Verily that, when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without the law, as without law, being not without the law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without the law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run, that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we are incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. But I keep under my body, and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. This is the word of the Lord. So we'll go through a couple different verses. Verse 1 says, Am I not free? People who like to believe we are in a dystopian future will say we are not free. Even Jean-Jacques Rousseau said man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. I don't believe it. We are freed by Jesus Christ. The next line, Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? The world is mine, and those who believe less of themselves will be lesser. Verse 5, Have we not power to lead about a brother, a sister, a wife, and as well as other apostles? I view this as a response to anyone who might criticize that, who am I to offer advice? Am I not free to lead about others? Verse 10, This is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope shall be partaker of his hope. I've made emphasis on the word hope before. With believing in the power of words, one should never lose hope. Now on to verse 12. So the verse before mentioned carnal things. We have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. While we may be partakers in them, carnal things, Paul is refraining so not to corrupt the gospel. People like to throw an ad hominem attack to discredit the message. Ad hominem meaning an attack on the person, not the argument they're making. Shooting the messenger, not the message. Examples would be like, that person's divorced, therefore they can't give marriage advice, or that priest has sinned, so religion is evil. Verses 14 and 16. They which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. Now 16. Woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. That is why we study the Bible. Woe is unto me if not. If we only have time for one book, make it the good book. People have spent their whole lives studying just this book and not exhausted its gifts. Everything else we study is to raise our capacity to understand the gospel. Verse 19. I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. This is what a good leader does. Alex shared a meme discussing how the alpha wolf isn't the strongest. That's obvious because if the biggest, baddest guy bullies others too much, they will literally gang up and rip him apart. A lesson I was taught as a sergeant is to let the Joes eat first. Joes being lower ranks, privates. That the order of eating is from lowest rank to highest. If we run out of food, the leader makes a personal sacrifice for those he commands. Now, verse 24. They which run in a race run all, so run. And I take that to go, do it. It doesn't matter how fast, how slow you go, run. And here's another Eminem rap for that. Keep plugging. It's your only outlet and your only outfit. So you know they're going to talk about it. As with the meditations, to not take the surface meaning, my interpretation of any of these readings is not to be right, but to be thought-provoking. And hopefully we learn critical thinking skills along the way. Verse 25. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown. It's easy to think that I'm obsessed with this crown, but all this gold is just dust. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment. I'd love for you to join in the conversation. Now, last week, I talked a lot about infinity, and I saw something saying Google's quantum computing takes energy from parallel universes. And this is what always happens. We get some new thing, give it a fantasy explanation, then come to grips with it actually not being new in the first place. It comes from a place you're not observing. Given enough time, we'll see every action has an equal and opposite reaction, likely in the form of something breaking. Then we'll gain a better understanding. Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 Space Odyssey, the book, said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Now we'll switch over to our philosophy book, 50 philosophy ideas you really need to know. We're up to idea number 9. It's going to be the Turing Test. So this one starts off with an interview with Perry. And Perry keeps talking about the mafia as the worst gangsters and the law should do something about those Italian crooks. Now, Perry sounds like a man in trouble, maybe, but his biggest problem isn't the mob. It's the fact that he's a computer program created in 1971 by Kenneth Colby, a psychiatrist at Stanford University. Perry was interviewed alongside a number of genuine paranoid patients, and the results were then assessed by a panel of psychiatrists. No one on the panel guessed that Perry was not a real patient. The question then is, can Perry think? And this is where we get into the Turing Test. In 1950s, the British mathematician Alan Turing created this test. The test has a person speaking to two separate entities, and they're separated from each other, and it's through electric communication, so they don't see the person. And after some time, they have to determine which is a human and which is a computer. So the example with Perry was not a true Turing test because they did not know one of the patients was a computer. One of my early questions when trying to distinguish which is a computer would be give pi to the 10th decimal. Sure, some people can do it, but what is the likelihood that that person is there? With the Turing test, I'd say that humans are ill-equipped to judge if something can think, since we love to put personalities on inanimate objects, giving a car gender pronouns, or in the army, we were told our weapon was our girlfriend and to give it a name. An argument against the Turing test is called the Chinese room. In 1980, by the US philosopher John Searle, he imagined an English speaker not knowing a word of Chinese, and he was confined to this room where they would be given Chinese characters, letters, and he had a rule book for what should be done with them. The person doesn't speak Chinese, but in time masters the rules to where their output is indistinguishable from a Chinese speaker. Just as there is no understanding with the Chinese room, there is none in a computer program. No understanding, no intelligence, no mind, and never more than a simulation of these things. This creates a problem for behavioralism. Now, behavioralism is the central idea behind it is that mental phenomenon can be translated without any loss of content into kinds of behaviors or dispositions to behaviors, meaning the human body is a series of inputs and outputs. A sharp object pressed against the skin is an input, sends the signal to the brain that would be pain, and you would move away from the object would be the output behavior. The Chinese room implies that humans don't even think, let alone computers. The book also had a note in pop culture in 2001 Space Odyssey. The supercomputer in that is named HAL, and that comes from IBM, and it's one letter removed for each. So HIABLM, HAL, IBM. Now we can move on to our math section. The numbers are 4, 8, 4, 1. Okay, what I've got is to do 8 minus 1 equals 7. 4 times 7, I believe, is 28. 28 minus 4 equals 24. I'm excited for the math section going forward once we get through all these 24 cards because math has always been my favorite subject. In high school, anytime I had an elective available, I would take the next available math class. So we'll get in some exciting quadratics and SOHCAHTOA, if you're familiar with that one. Final thought, I think, therefore I am. A computer only knows, it can't think. If you'd like more, check out my website, drawingmylifeaway.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.